I'm Rhein Zarghami. I work in Cummings and Lockwood Stamford office, and I've been charged with the enviable task of updating you on any tax law changes that have happened since we last got together a year ago. And the big change was about a year ago, 11 months ago, we had the Act to provide for reconciliation pursuant to Titles 2 and 5 of the concurrent resolution on budget for fiscal year 2018. It rolls right off the tongue, but that is the new tax law. People call it the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which is much easier to say. And you know, us T&E lawyers, we love acronyms, so we call it the TCJA. That did a sweeping overhaul of a lot of parts of the code. It was effective January 1 of this year, so you've probably gotten familiar with it. In these northeastern states, a lot of people are talking about the SALT limitations. But for us, today we're focusing on the estate and gift tax changes, and the new law severely impacts the number of estates that will be subject to estate tax. And so what that means is that there are some real opportunities for your clients. We doubled the estate tax exemption to $10 million indexed for inflation. That's why you see all these kind of crazy numbers. This current taxable year is 11,180, and then we're increasing to a rounder number, but it's still a little funny, 11,4 in January. We'll expect those changes to increase year to year with inflation. The inflated number will be announced in October, November of each year, until it sunsets in 2026, and then we go back to a much more reduced number of about $5.5 million. The proposed regulations issued last week, November 20th, by the IRS, said that there will be no clawback. That's been like a big buzzword. People were worried that if they made big gifts under this exemption number, if the next president is Bernie Sanders and it's a very blue Congress, that we would go back to a $1 million exemption level or something like that, and that you would be penalized for having taken advantage of these big exemption numbers. That's no longer going to be a concern according to the proposed regulations. So you can take advantage of this $22 million exemption per married couple without fear of some sort of punitive retribution later, according to these proposed regs. So we have about 10 years to think about making major gifts for very wealthy clients, unless something happens in 2020 at that election and we do get a new government who decides to change this law. And so then years 2019 and 2020 will be very important for high net worth clients to think about making major gifts. So you want to be mindful of that, because clients will love to blame somebody about why they didn't take advantage of this when they could, when their neighbor did and had a great advisor who advised them to take advantage. So a couple years to think about these issues. We have in Connecticut some new laws being the pertinent word. We had 2 bills passed the Senate and House in Connecticut, and both were signed by the governor, and they conflict. What we're talking about here is that typically when conflicting laws are signed, you look at the time the House passed the bill. And so you can see in the slide that I've footnoted the exact time that each was signed. So you would ordinarily think that Senate Bill 543 was going to be the law of the land, except the governor signed them in reverse order. And so no one actually knows. And when I say nobody knows, I raised my hand earlier this month when the commissioner of the DRS was speaking and asked the big crowd if they had any questions, and I said, yes, what is the law? And he said, I'll get back to you. Sign your name and your email address on a sheet, and I'll send you an email once we know. So I did. I still haven't gotten my email, but Scott Jackson said that they are aware of the issue and they will resolve it. They don't actually have to resolve it, you'll see in the next slide, until 2021, which is when the real divergence happens. So, government will probably hear on 12/31 of 20 what the law is. But this is the law we think that is the pertinent one. And you can see that we increased to the federal exemption level as of 2023, and we go up significantly each year. Clients will get a big bump, $1 million bump, and this is per individual, so for a married couple it would be double in January and increasing from there. And the estate tax rate, if you're just trying to figure out what Connecticut taxes are, is about 10% when you're looking at amounts over the exemption amount. And if we are wrong, the chart looks similar until 2021, when it's frozen at the law as of 2016, the federal law. So either way, Connecticut residents are in better shape than they were before with either of these laws. When we look at how Connecticut compares with other states that have an estate tax, about a quarter of the US states have an estate tax. A lot of the northeastern states do. You be the judge, but as soon as we get up to the $11 million range, we're going to be in a more advantageous tax position than other states with a lower exemption, especially states with, a $1 million exemption. You have to remember that these estate tax laws apply to not only residents of that state, but clients who own any property in those states too. So a second home in Nantucket would limit the clients to a $1 million exemption amount in their planning. How does Connecticut compare with a gift tax? We are all alone. We are the only state with a gift tax, which is another planning opportunity you can point out to your clients that don't live in Connecticut. Maybe they live in New York. If they make a gift, it's subject to the federal tax and the federal exemption amount. If they live in New York, but there is no gift tax, if they die with the same property, there is a New York estate tax on that property. So you're going to want to think about that, especially, for example, a Connecticut client with a New York condo. A gift of that condo would not be subject to Connecticut tax because it's out of state, and it would be subject to a New York gift tax, but New York doesn't have one. So a planning opportunity there to think about. Thanks so much.